Hello, fellow troubadours. We are here for another edition of the Inside Scoop, where we have a subject matter expert helping us with things that I know if I'm struggling with some of these things, other people probably are too. And it's a little bit self-serving because I love to find the experts that know all this stuff about the stuff that I'm not good at. So we are talking today to Marie Leslie, the small business simplifier. And just her name alone, I think, is awesome because that gives me such a visual, and who doesn't want to simplify things, right? So thanks for being here, Marie.
Well, thanks for having me.
Sure. Marie is an expert in productivity and organization, and she does a lot of different things. I know also with images and with media. And so maybe the simplifier, and you can give us that overall umbrella. The simplifier can give us some more overarching description of what you do. So I think as entrepreneurs, we're wearing all the hats, we're doing all the things, we can get ourselves overwhelmed very easily. And it's super easy to get down in the weeds, right? Instead of, and not be able to climb out and get that big picture. And so I know I do that. I know a lot of people do that as well. So why don't you take a few minutes and introduce yourself and give us an idea of what you do and the kind of people you help.
All right. Well, I am, like you said, a productivity and growth strategist. Work primarily with entrepreneurs and small businesses. And my focus really is in ending that overwhelm that comes along with entrepreneurship for so many of us. I got my background in organizing is that I grew up in an incredibly organized household. And I found it easier for me to be creative when it was orderly instead of chaos. I've always been an entrepreneur. I started my first business at 12.
Doing what?
I had I made macrame pot hangers.
Oh, how cute.
Now you know how old I am. But it paid a lot more than babysitting, and it did not involve dirty diapers.
There you go.
So it was a great business.
That's funny.
And I had other businesses, obviously, between now and then, among other things. I was a private swim instructor in high school. I grew up in Southern California, and everybody had a pool. So everybody's kids needed to swim. And I would ride my scooter to their house and teach their kids how to swim in their pool. And then in college, I became a photographer, started a business there. And I did that. That was my full-time job for probably 30 years or so. And then when we came to Colorado, I shifted gears into full-time consulting, which I picked up along the way as a photographer. So here I am now, helping people figure out how to make their businesses productive, profitable, and enjoyable, because it really should be fun. If it's not fun, why are you doing it?
Well, right. That's why we all started. I had a conversation earlier today with someone, and we talked about the freedom and all those things. That's why we started business. And then all of a sudden, I think we shackle ourselves in so many ways, and maybe that's not necessary.
Yeah. I heard someone refer to, did you turn your entrepreneurship into a job?
Right. Yeah.
And I've done that at times.
Well, it's hard. It's difficult not to, I would say, so, okay. Well, I have a lot of questions for you about organization. And like I mentioned before, that's not necessarily my jam, but you just said something that I wanted to touch back on, and we could start there. And you were saying you grew up in an orderly household and things were organized, and you found it easier to be creative when things were orderly. So I find that really interesting, because I tend to think that I'm creative, I can't get it organized because that would somehow wreck my creativity. So explain that a little bit.
All right. Well, the science says that's, they do these studies, and they say that's kind of the true thing. If creatives are disorganized, well, apparently I'm the anomaly. For me, it's easier. I have a cartoon somewhere, so I know I'm not the only one that shows. I'm also a writer. My degree is in journalism. I've been writing since I was very, very small. And my husband will tell you, we married while I was still in college. And he always knew when I had a project due, because he would come home from work and the house would be spotless.
Is that called procrastinating?
I would have to get everything in order so I could sit down and write.
Mm,
And so it just, for me, that's what works. When things get too crazy and too chaotic, it's hard for me to focus. So, and
yeah,
focus
I
on
get
anything
that.
but the mess.
Right. That does make sense actually, because I guess essentially when you're straightening things up, you're
Mhm.
creating space, right?
Yeah.
Space to do things, or physical space, those kinds of things. Okay. So you mentioned overwhelm and helping people with overwhelm. And I think that most entrepreneurs that I know are either in overwhelm sometimes or all the time, unfortunately. But I think we start telling ourselves these messages of, I'm just really good at that, or I'm not really good at that. Like it's some
Mhm.
inherent skill. And it's kind of like, I'm going to quit trying to figure out how to use systems or clean my desk off because I'm just not good at that. So do you think that's a thing, or can we all learn these skills?
I think we can learn them. I think some people are, blessed with that skill, and it comes more easily to them. And for others, they have to work at it more. I'm sure that for me, part of it was the fact that I grew up in a household where I saw organization modeled all the time. There are some online jokes about people who remember my mother and her organizational quirks.
Quirks.
But, some of it, it's personality. It's how we're wired. And then for others, there are other issues that can contribute to being disorganized, like having ADHD or anxiety, or just having too much on your plate.
Mm,
When you're so busy running around trying to keep all the plates spinning, it's really tough to focus on, oh, let me just make this all neat and organized and be able to find things.
right. True. True. So do you help people? I mean, you help them kind of maybe fix their mess, but are you then like essentially teaching them to fish as well so that they can go forward doing things differently?
Yeah, I do. I don't think anybody's doomed to a life of chaos. One of the biggest struggles that I think a lot of people have is that they're trying to fit into someone else's idea of what organized looks like.
Oh,
We've all seen those online images with the perfect pantries and the immaculate offices and laundry rooms that clearly have never even seen a dirty sock, much less a family's washing for an entire week.
right.
And so that is one of the first things I do, is help people figure out what is their definition of organized, what it would look like, what it would feel like to them to be organized, and then how that would impact their life.
Oh, okay.
And then once we know what they're looking for in organized, then we can go that way.
Okay. So if you're helping someone organize, I don't know why I think of it in terms of this. I think of my physical space and just all
Mhm.
my stuff being organized or disorganized. But then I think also of all of my digital things, like the things you can't see, right? You're like
Yes.
your people that are going paperless, and you've got all this information somewhere else. And then a third thing, I guess, also would be just the information that you have in your brain, right? So there's
Mhm.
like all those different spaces. And so how do we come to terms with which one's creating the problem? Does that make sense?
Mhm. Obviously on the surface, most people would say physical. It's obvious if you're physically disorganized, if you have piles everywhere and you're spending hours hunting for things or hunting for the car keys or whatever it is you're looking for, that client's order because they're coming in 5 minutes to pick it up and you don't remember where you put it. But digital can be a bigger problem because it's so easy to hide it.
Oh, it's not staring you in the face.
Yeah, unless you're one of those people whose computer monitor is completely covered with icons, which I admittedly just kind of gives me a little panic attack. I have like 4 icons on my desktop, and that's it.
Oh man. Okay, I'm not going to
But
show you mine.
we can easily hide it in a folder. And if you don't have any kind of system, you're going to run into the same problem. What did I name that file, and where is it, and how do I find it? And
Oh,
it can be covered up until your computer crashes or you can't find something critical for a job. And so with more businesses online, that's becoming a bigger issue.
so that makes me think, if you're not being able to find something, so is the act of organizing that could that sometimes be like a disguise or a Band-Aid for actually fixing the problem?
Mhm. Yeah, it's like rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, It's pretty
Oh.
and it looks nice. It's like, the pantry with all the pretty labeled containers, but there's still nothing in there to eat.
Okay, all right. So then, so what, like, walk us through. So if you've got this disorganization going on, instead of just making it into nice, neat little piles, or instead of just hiding all the stuff on your desktop so you don't see it, what's the process to go through that would at least help people try to begin to be a little more organized?
Well, the first thing is, what's your frustration? Sit down, make a list. What are the things that frustrate you the most, or
Okay.
that are making you crazy, or that your customers, your associates, your vendors, people you work with are complaining about?
Hmm.
Where do you see yourself dropping the ball? Once you have an idea of what those things are, you can pick out what's the most critical one I have to do first. Is it that I'm not responding to phone calls timely, or emails, messages, whatever, that people are waiting 3 or 4 days to hear from me? Are you missing appointments? That one's really embarrassing and gives you a bad reputation quickly. Are you missing orders? Are you not getting your bills paid on time?
Right.
Or is there something else going on? Once you figure out that, then you can prioritize that. What do I need to tackle first? And that kind of will tell you where to go. I mean, if your issue is that you're missing emails and phone calls and things, then the first thing you probably need to do is come up with a system for responding to your clients, to business associates, to whoever's calling you, even if it's your mother. That won't get in trouble really fast.
Exactly, I get that. But so how do you do that when you're like literally, if you know that you're struggling with getting back to people, I think it's easy for us to say, I'm going to make a new policy. I'm going to say, I'm going to get back to everyone within 24 hours. But how do you make that stick? Because just saying it doesn't feel like, in other words, if you don't change anything, how are you all of a sudden going to do that new behavior?
Yeah, and that's what you have to change is, what's a new, what can I put in place that will help me remember? Is it setting an alarm on my phone at 9 o'clock every morning that says, I will make phone calls to all the people who called the day before, or I will send out emails. One of the things I tell people, if you're having trouble with the emails and messages, is give yourself designated times to look at the email. Don't spend all day with your email open or your messenger open or whatever it is, just in case somebody calls you. In most businesses, they are not expecting an instantaneous response, especially if you have an autoresponder or a voicemail that says, I make calls. I worked with a business coach who, when you left her a message, it said, I will call you at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, or I return calls between 10 and 11 in the morning. Okay. You can expect to hear from me then.
Okay.
No. Yeah. And you're gonna slip up. You're never going to be perfect out of the gate.
Right.
Remember that when you're trying to clean up your mess, it gets messier before it gets better.
Oh, and maybe that's why sometimes we don't want to do it, because in the back of our minds, we know that's going to happen. And that sometimes I think creates a little bit of a panic feeling. It's like, if I took everything out of my filing cabinet right now and laid it out on the floor, oh my gosh, that like doesn't feel very good.
Yeah, you look at it and go, oh, what have I done? And then you cram it all back in, and it's even worse. It's recognizing that we have to get through this is going to be hard and icky and messy, but on the other side, it's going to feel so much better.
Okay. So you talked about prioritizing which problems are the worst. Would you say that comes down to they're the worst because of how they make you feel, or because they're costing you money? Like, what do you use as measurement?
Either one of those can be. I mean, in all honesty, if your biggest issue is paying your bills on time or tracking your finances, that is number one, because you can do whatever you want with your customers, but if you are not paying the bills, especially things like your taxes, right, you will not be in business long. And so you want to worry about if you're not responding to customers or whatever. I mean, that kind of, some things are, you should be able to look at it and say, this is a potential crisis that could shut down my business. That's the biggest thing. And yeah, those things may not only do that, but I don't know too many people who don't pay their bills on time that feel good.
Well,
Because then you're
exactly.
always stressed and you're worrying about when the phone rings. Is that a creditor calling to find out when my payment's coming?
Right. Yeah, you're right. So those things that maybe seem like they're in the financial bucket, they're certainly going to spill over, right? And they're going to, and so all of those things at some point will result in you don't feel good about it. And so,
yeah, and that's to business. Financial legal issues are almost always your highest problem.
okay.
If you're making a list and they're on there, they're almost always at the top.
Okay. So that would be, so if you have things like that, and maybe we know that, we just don't want to face that, because I'm thinking if you have financial or legal things and you look at all these things, it makes sense that that's what you said earlier, something about how critical it is if it's a crisis that could shut down your business. I like that. So if we could literally make a laundry list of all the things that we think are problems, and then it's like, could this really shut down my business? Well, no, it's just annoying, right? Could this really shut down my business? Oh, it could. And then there's a star right there, right? That says, okay, move me to the top of the list.
Yeah, that's gonna move you up. And unfortunately, a lot of times without help, the way we deal with those is to take care of all the little itty bitty things that don't really matter, while those turn into big giant monsters of problems.
And then we call Marie because we say, I've been putting this off. What do I do? So are there places that you see most entrepreneurs getting stuck? Like, is there something in common that for some reason entrepreneurs, the people you work with, they keep coming back to the same few problems?
One of them is, for most of us who are entrepreneurs, is that we had no idea when we started a business what the back end of it was going to look like.
Yes.
I started my, as a teenager with businesses, it wasn't a big deal.
Right.
I didn't have to worry about all the legal, and, it was just kind of this little side hustle thing. When I started my photography business, I really didn't know or didn't think I knew anybody who was an entrepreneur. That wasn't a word we used a lot. There were people who owned businesses, but businesses are big. And I was this little bitty person doing this thing. I had no idea about, I knew I needed a business license, and I knew I needed a sales tax permit. I had no idea about the rest. And I had to, learn all that bookkeeping and stuff. And so most of us don't start businesses so we can be administrators. We do I'm really good at this, I could make money. I mean, that's how I started. It was actually my mom said, you're really good at photography, you should be charging for this. And I took that to mean I should have a business. And then I got to learn all this stuff the hard way. And the other thing is thinking that owning a business means we have to do it all ourselves.
Good point. That was going to be my next question. How do you determine, because I think that's you hit the nail on the head there. It's like most of us start a business because we like doing something and we're good at it. And then all of a sudden we find we're spending all of our time running the business or working on the business, and we aren't even doing that thing that we like anymore. So how do you know which things are things you should give to somebody else? Because I also think when entrepreneurs start new businesses, we have this mindset of, oh, I'm just starting, I can't afford to pay somebody else.
Yeah. And, get out there and meet people in the beginning. For some of the things I did, I bartered and traded. I do not like bookkeeping. I don't have a problem putting the numbers in. Analyzing them. I love analyzing the numbers, but I find, the data entry to be really tedious. That was the first thing I hired in my photography studio was a bookkeeper. And at the time I didn't have much money, but I had a friend who was a bookkeeper, and she had a little girl and she loved to have her photographed. And so we set up a barter, and I would do, a quarterly portrait session with her, and she would take care of my books. So you can do things like that, and find people that you can trade services with. If you're like a consultant, is there, say, a graphic designer who could make you a logo in exchange for this? Or figure out what's really important when you're starting out too. Do I really need a fancy logo? Do I need more than a basic website? And you can have those things later when you can pay somebody.
Right.
But
Good. That's a good point. Okay. Because most of us do start out doing all the things, right? So
Mhm.
when we're trying to be more organized, so now let's talk about some of the tools, like the tips and the tools that we could actually use to be more organized. I don't know how long I operated until I finally started using Calendly to schedule meetings, and I was scheduling everything by hand manually and scheduling over the top of myself. And it was a missed meeting that made me think, oh my gosh, I got to get this under control. So what do you think are maybe the top 3 tools that people could use to solve some of their common disorganization problems?
Well, I say the first one is a calendar, and things that go along with a calendar.
Okay.
I use both a digital and a physical calendar. The digital one, and I use Google Calendar because meetings can magically show up on there from people, and I don't have to, I don't have to worry about pulling it out. I also have basically it's a day planner on my desk where I write down the things I want to get done each day. Because for me, the active writing actually is proven in our brains to help us. It triggers something that helps us remember. And so I find that when I write things down, it helps. I don't have to write down all the details. For example, on today's calendar, it just says meeting with Lori.
And then it jogs your memory to know, oh, what's that about? And then you remember.
Yeah. And so a calendar, use it for your appointments, both personal and business. I have Google Calendar. I have divided in 2. So I can see both personal and business things at the same time. But people who need to see my business calendar only see my business things. I use it for time blocking, which is essentially making appointments with yourself. And that keeps people from, like you, I use an automatic scheduler. It's called Calendar Hero. And I can block out time so that people can't set up meetings with me during designated periods. And then things, tracking your orders, tracking your jobs, that kind of stuff. A calendar is, I had 4 kids. We lived and died by the calendar when they were all at home.
Sure. Oh, that makes sense. And I think a lot of people do that in a business, in a personal sense. But then when it comes to their business, it's not that people don't have calendars. I think everyone's got a calendar on their phone. Some people still write on calendars. But I think maybe it's just me. I'm guessing it's probably not just me. I will put appointments with other people on my calendar, and then I can look at my phone and have a visual of whether I'm busy or not. And it's not giving me a true story, because I might have a million things to do that are really important that I need to do, and they don't even hit my calendar. So how do we solve that problem? Is that the time blocking?
That is time blocking. For example, I have 2 2-hour blocks each week. I call it CEO time. And then I also have a 2-hour block, which sometimes gets divided in half, of admin time.
Okay.
And that is for the administrative tasks in my business. And CEO time is specifically focused on business building.
That's what I was going to ask, the difference between.
On the things, that's the working on my business. The admin time is working in my business.
Okay.
And then I have, I'll block out time to write a blog post or schedule social media, things like that, so that I'm not overloading myself. Or get to Friday and be like, oh, I didn't get any of this stuff done this week, and now I have to spend Friday night working. I don't like that.
And nor do most of us. But then sometimes it will cause us to push off something that's important. So even though you know in your head that you need to write a blog post, you're saying make that blog post an appointment no different than the appointment you might have with a client or with your doctor.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. You are as important as your clients are. Obviously, it's your business. And so that setting that time aside for specific things you need to do, make sure that you are not overloading yourself.
Okay. All right. Okay. So besides a calendar, what else?
I use Google Voice, and there are some other similar things like Ring Central. You know, a number of years ago, when, especially being a photographer, you're never in the studio, you're always out in the
Right.
field. I used my cell phone for my business. Well, the problem with that is I'm on 24/7
Yeah.
because I can't do it. With Google Voice, you can control your calls. It's a dedicated phone number. It rings to my phone, my cell phone, and
Uh-huh.
it says Google Voice on it. So I know it's a client call or a business call. It has a do not disturb function. It
Okay.
has voicemail. In fact, it not only has voicemail, but it will send you a transcription of your, which is really useful, of your voice message. And they're not always right. Sometimes it's kind of humorous. Doesn't quite understand what they're saying, but you at least have an idea of who's calling and what they're calling about. And you can read it as a text message or an email. And so that gives me back control. I can turn my phone off when my business hours are done and turn it back on when I'm ready to be at work again.
What a concept. Is there a fee for Google Voice?
No, it is
That's
free.
what I've heard. It's free. Okay.
And I really started looking and made the switch after I once had a nervous groom call me at 5:30 in the morning.
Oh, no.
And when I answered the phone, he said, "Oh, I didn't really expect you to answer." And I was like, "You're calling me and my phone's ringing at 5:30. I'm assuming it's an emergency."
I thought you were canceling your wedding.
Now I might wish you were.
Wow. Oh, okay. So calendaring, Google Voice,
Mhm.
anything else that you can think of that like no entrepreneur should be without?
Some sort of convenient filing system, whether
Okay.
it's a physical one, a digital one, or a hybrid. You need a way to be able to put your hands on important documents, notes, whatever, quickly and easily without spending 30 minutes looking for them. And I
Okay.
use a combination of paper files. I use magazine boxes. Magazine
Oh, yeah.
boxes, you
Mhm.
buy them at IKEA for like $1.99, and just folders, just regular pocket folders that
Mhm.
I can stick things in, and I write the job or project or client's name on the front of it, and I keep it on my desk because I don't have, if I have more projects than will fit in the box, I have too many projects at one time.
Oh, that's a good way to
And then I also
control
use
your
Trello, which
Trello.
is free. It has both free and paid versions,
Mhm.
and where I can link to things on my computer or notes or whatever. And I can, when like even in a meeting like this or on a phone call, I can pull it up real quickly and know exactly where I am with a client or a job.
Mhm. That's a good thing. So you mentioned earlier though, when we were talking about hiding things
Mhm.
digitally so that you can't find them, because I think that a lot of people just say, I know I have that. Like they feel confident they have it. It doesn't mean they can put their hands on it in 30 seconds or 30 minutes even for that you know matter. So do you have any tips on how we can basically either organize, I know that's a big topic, but
Yeah.
naming conventions or ways to think about, ways just to even think about your desktop or your folders to help you so that you can find things later?
Well, that's why, like the front of my folders, I take a label and write whatever it is on the front, either the client name, the business name, the project. I have multiple websites. Each website has its own folder, so that when I pull one up to work on it, I can just pull out the folder and say, "Oh, here's what I'm, here are the things I'm doing." So that helps. On the computer, I have different folders. I have a folder for active clients and an archive client folder. So if people I worked with in the past, and then inside that folder, there's a folder by name. So, I have a folder for Smith, I have a folder for Jones, whoever, and everything I do with that client is in that folder.
Okay.
And so that means, if they call and they need to know about something, I can bring that up. And depending on who it is and how we work together, there may be subfolders in there. I have one client that I do events for. And so I sort them, his events, by date into different folders, so that everything for each event is in that folder. If he calls me and says, "What's going on for our September event?" I can immediately open the folder and say, "Oh, okay, here's where we're at."
Okay. So, okay, here's a question. That sounds very reasonable and that sounds very basic. Like we should all be able to figure it out. It's like make separate folders, put all of Susie's things in Susie's folders and put all of John's thing in John folder. Why don't we do it? Why? I mean, do you think it's a learning curve of figuring out how to be more efficient, or is it just because people are lazy, or do we just start saving something in a hurry?
Mhm. I think it's a combination of things. One is that we get in a hurry, especially if we're on the phone or meeting with a client. Sometimes, especially early in our business, we get very nervous about, I don't want to keep them waiting, or I want to appear like I have my act together.
Yeah.
We really try and fool ourselves with that all the time and do that. And in the beginning, when we don't have a lot of clients or we don't have a lot of business, we're kind of lazy about it because we aren't sure how we want to do it. And one of the things, when I started building multiple websites, both for me and for other people, I found myself having to go back. Oh, I missed this. Oh, I missed that. I finally made myself a physical checklist. And so now when I go to, for example, build a website or set up a social media site or whatever, I can just pull out that checklist and I can say, do this, do this, do this, do this. And I don't have to think about it anymore. And that's where we run into troubles. Our brains get full. And without a system, we have to think about what we're doing all the time. And it's easy to get distracted or flustered or whatever. And then where did I put that file?
Right. Well, that's true. Or if you left your file open and then
Mhm.
you have something else you're working on and you close up that file, there might be something in there that shouldn't necessarily be in there, and those kind of things
Yes.
happen. And then it seems like you can never find those.
Yeah,
So,
I've spent hours on those kind of things.
oh, exactly. I have too. And sometimes you never find them. So it sounds like sometimes we make it harder than it is. Would you
Yes.
agree with that? So if we have a
Definitely.
basic way and say we need to keep track of things, and then we need a system in order to do it, if we're looking at new tools, like say we want to get a scheduling tool, I think sometimes the reason people don't implement that is they think the learning curve is going to be too big. So how do you have that way off of, okay, this might be a pain in the neck for a day or a week or whatever, but I
Mhm.
need to do it? Does that go back to that same question about like how much of a crisis is it? Or how do you figure out that?
Yeah. And part of it is change one thing at a time.
Okay.
It's, oh, I have all these things I need to fix. Pick one and become, get that changed, feel good, successful. That will carry you to the next one. It's when we try and fix everything all at once. It's like, when my kids were growing up and they had messy rooms, I mean, like most kids, it was chaos. And I would say, go clean your room. Well, where do you start?
Yes.
Very quickly you get overwhelmed because you're looking at, oh, my filing's not good and my bookkeeping's not good and my phone calls aren't good. And pretty soon it's like, I can't do this. It's too much. So pick one thing.
So that's where the overwhelm.
Pick that one thing at a time. And always start with the simplest, cheapest solution. That's my theory.
Okay.
If there's something free that will work, try that first.
Okay. Okay. That's great advice.
And give yourself grace, because it will get worse before it gets better. Because you're going to start beating yourself up for not doing it the new way. And you just have to say, this takes time. The 21 days for a new habit, that's a myth. It's more like 90. And so you need to cut yourself some grace for quite a while.
Okay. And I think that's probably a lot of it. You really do need to give yourself the grace, because if you just think I'm so unorganized and other people aren't, number one, no grace. So then you're already beating yourself up before you've even tried to implement this new process, right? And I really like your analogy of the kids with the room, because if you say, go into your room and just pick up your shoes, that's one thing, right? Or just pick up your books, it's one thing. So I guess if we applied that to ourselves, that would be very helpful and so much less stressful, right?
Yes. Yeah, we need to remember, we're human, and it just one thing at a time. Pick one. You're not, it's like when we say, I'm out of shape. I need a diet. And I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to change the way I eat and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And 3 days later, we're back to square one,
Too much.
binging on the Oreos
Yeah, yeah.
because we're
too much.
frustrated.
Okay, so here's my takeaways. My takeaways, figuring out what's hurting the most. Is the business, could this put me out of business? Figuring out some kind of a system to help you be more organized, and then giving yourself grace on the back end when you're trying to implement it. So I think that
Yes.
following through, those all sound like very basic, solid advice that we just have to keep reminding ourselves of, right?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
And it's a process of, 2 steps forward and 1 step back.
Right, right.
And
Well,
eventually we'll progress.
well, exactly. You do. So thank you so much. Those tips were great. And I think sometimes when we're looking for answers, we think it's going to be a magic bullet, right? It's going to be some pill that we can take, or some simple, little thing where we flip a switch and all of a sudden it's all fixed. And sometimes we realize it's just like you said, it's little things, 1 step at a time to get you there. So
Yes.
I think that was great. I want to close up with something I call the lightning round, where I just ask you 5 questions. It helps us get to know you a little bit better. And so number 1 is, what book or podcast, if you're not a big reader, but what book are you reading right now? Business or personal, or both?
Oh gosh, I don't know for sure the name of it. I do book reviews. It's a book about spies, American spies during World War II, and how they fought the Nazis. I think it's called Why We Fought is what it's called. And I'll be reviewing it in the next couple of weeks. So that's my current read.
Interesting. Someone just told me it was a spy thing from World War II, but it was not American. I think it was a British spy. That's funny. That's interesting. Okay. What's your favorite social media platform?
Oh, my favorite, I think it's LinkedIn.
Okay.
I love LinkedIn. I can waste lots of time on Facebook, but I always learn something on LinkedIn.
Agreed. I agree. I think that's probably one of the most underappreciated and underused, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
I'd agree with that.
Okay. When it comes to calendar, and you answered this a little bit before, but if I made you choose, paper or digital?
Digital.
Okay.
Digital. It's always with me.
Good point. Good point. Okay. What is the last picture on your phone, Marie?
Oh, it's probably a selfie. I had a good hair day, so I had to make a selfie.
There you go. Good.
If it's not a selfie, it's my cat.
Okay. All right. And lastly, what's your superpower?
Oh, I say strategy. It's being able to see where you are and where you want to be and figure out the map, how to get there.
That's good. That's a good superpower. We don't all have that. And I think, that's what makes the world beautiful, right? We all have different superpowers, but
Yes.
we got to utilize the powers of other people when we don't have that. So thank you so much for chatting with me. I hope this was helpful to other people. It was very helpful to me. And part of it, I think, is realizing it doesn't have to be so as awful as we think it's going to be. That was my big takeaway.
Well, good. I'm glad, because it shouldn't. Business should be fun. Being an entrepreneur is supposed to be enjoyable.
That's true. That's a good reminder. So we will post this video, and then below post all the ways that you can contact Marie and follow her on social media, check out her website and all those good things. And for all of you troubadours, keep marketing, and thank you so much. Bye.